Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. I am Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us. We've got a jam-packed show for you guys today, so thanks for joining us as we get into it. With the ACC Week 10 approaching, we are going to be breaking down our power rankings on this show, but we're also going to be leading off with a little mini SMU-Miami game preview, look back on how the Mustangs fared against Wake Forest, look at how Miami fared against Stanford in this basically elimination game for the ACC championship. So we'll do all that on this edition of All Access AM as we get rolling on this Wednesday morning. Thanks for joining us. Please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, that follow button for us, and leave us a rating and a review, and let us know what you want to see as well. We appreciate all of you guys who have jumped in the comments. So we'll be taking your questions whenever you want, as we are live 7 to 8 a.m. Central Time, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. Thanks for being with us. We are presented by our friends at OPW Solutions. OPW Solutions is a full-service commercial landscaping, pressure washing, snow and ice control, commercial service company that can help you manage really all the aspects of your business that you don't want to, for sure. It includes, like I said, the commercial landscaping side of things. It includes the pressure washing. They can even put Christmas lights up with the holiday season right around the corner. OPW Solutions is your go-to for this, and they are in the North Texas area. They're in Oklahoma. They are expanding rapidly throughout the United States. So they're going to be growing with you and your business every step of the way, and they'll help you make sure that your business looks top notch, you know, from the outside to anything else that they can do for you in regards to your full service exterior maintenance that is needed. They're also in Arkansas, and they can handle multiple locations across your markets as well. So make sure you give them a call at 214 444-2305, info@opwsolutions.com, or go to opwsolutions.com for more information on all the things they can do for you. AJ Crow really does a good job of giving you guys a good look on their social media as well. So give them a follow on their social media channels, which you can find at opwsolutions.com. Great chance to just get a little glimpse at what they could do for you and your business. So without any further ado, I do want to bring in a special guest to preview SMU-Miami. For the most part, we'll kind of start turning our attention to that. But he is a former SMU offensive lineman. He breaks down the Mustangs at ontheponyexpress.com. His name, for a lot of you who are familiar with our work over there, Hayden Howerton. And Hayden is a good friend of the show. Hayden, thanks for jumping on with us this morning, bright and early. I'm excited to have you on.
I'm excited to be here, man. I already got my coffee going this morning, so thanks for getting me on. Can't wait to talk some ACC football as a whole. But should we get going with the Wake recap, or do you want to jump right into Miami? Because I feel like you can't talk about one without the other, as this has been an up and down SMU Mustang team so far this year.
Exactly. We've got to start with Wake, 13-12 loss to Wake Forest on the road. And we talk about a lot of across the ACC landscape of, and our friends of the show, Eric McLean and Kelly Graham, like call them "you better nots," and that was a you better not type of game for SMU, sandwiched between Clemson and Miami, the two name brands, and they go up to Wake Forest and just didn't have it offensively. Defense played a great game, but this sets SMU back, similar to Miami in this ACC championship race now.
It's absolutely brutal. I mean, we had this one circled all offseason as the trap game, where you sandwich them between essentially our two biggest brands on our schedule, with the Clemson Tigers and the Miami Hurricanes. And like you said, the most disappointing thing was this offensive performance in a unit that I think upgraded in so many facets to enter the year. You get Kevin Jennings back in his second year. I think you upgrade at offensive line. I think your receiving core is really solid. You bring back both tight ends. The only downgrade was losing Brashard Smith to the NFL. But even then, I thought we had a stable of running backs that could do enough with how many guys we backfilled and things like that. But ultimately, to go out on offense, have less than 250 yards, 12 points, is really disappointing in a team that has really been their identity to go out on the road and have offense at least play well. So I was very disappointed in that. defensively, I think this team has improved every single week. I gave them an A+ over on our show for their performance. You give up 13 points, but you did everything you needed them to. They were put in some bad spots by the offense and special teams, but ultimately they came out with their best day so far this year. 5 turnovers forced by this SMU defense. Club takeaway was definitely setting up shop out there in Winston-Salem, but the defensive line has also been one that we've been watching this season that after the non-conference slate, I think maybe we had written off a little bit, but 2 sacks, 16 pressures on the day for the defensive line. A huge day for them, even with the absence of Cameron Robertson, as they turn around and they get it done on their side of the ball. Special teams was one that I think was even more disappointing than the offense. You leave 4 points out there as you get an extra point blocked. You pull a field goal to the left where the holder gave the kicker laces. And ultimately, this special teams unit just needs to be able to keep the other 2 in the game as you lose the one against Baylor in non-conference. You miss 3 field goals. And then to turn around on Saturday and have a very similar performance was very concerning for us over on our side, Billy. But ultimately, it's very disappointing now to have your first conference loss as part of that 20-game conference win streak get snapped on the road at Wake Forest. You knew the streak wouldn't last forever. I'm just very surprised that it happened when it did.
Yeah, that's the obviously tough thing about it. That conference winning streak is gone out the door, and most people, you look at the preseason, they probably would have just circled that Clemson game and say, hey, that's where it goes to die, but it doesn't. It falls at Wake Forest, which is the state of North Carolina has not been good to SMU on the football side of things for the most part. So a difficult loss, but let's also look at Miami here. They woke up in the second half and rolled 42-7 over Stanford, but it was 7-7 at the half. It was a game that, you and I were touching down and we saw the score and it was like, oh man, this one is getting interesting and stayed interesting for the entire first half before Miami just did what Miami was expected to do and really flexed its muscles.
And I do want to give props to Stanford as they gave us a little bit of trouble in the first half as well. They're a football program that even with an interim head coach right now, I think they are playing pretty well as they probably can with this current situation that they've got going over there. Andrew Luck's doing a really nice job of installing the culture. I saw that they're even picking up some recruits in this kind of weird situation that they have going out there. But ultimately, the story of this season so far has been Miami and how they've been able to respond. Miami's been a team in the past that has had really great first halves of the season. And then on the back half, they end up trailing off. They lose a couple games down the stretch, knocks them out of the ACC title race. So far this year, I mean, they have played really well in all but one game against the Louisville Cardinals. And for Carson Beck in that game to throw 4 interceptions and that really be the reason that they have their only blemish on their record. If Miami can take care of the football, they can beat anybody. They only have 7 turnovers on the year. 4 were in that Louisville game. You take away that game, they're top 3 in the country as far as taking away as far as hanging on to the football. But they're very talented top to bottom on their roster. It's going to be one of those games that SMU is going to have to grind this thing out and get a little bit lucky just because of how deep they are. There's not many holes on this Miami Hurricanes roster, and it starts with their defense. 11 total defense in the land. They're top 10 in scoring. They have a really great player on the edge, Ruben Bain Jr. I think a guy that could end up in New York, just depending on how this season goes. I don't know if he'll win the Heisman, but he is certainly one of the best defensive players in the country. And if SMU points their whole game plan to stop Ruben Bain Jr. from wrecking shop like he has so far this year with 40 pressures, it's going to be one that everybody else is going to have to win their one-on-one battles. You're going to have to take care of Akeem Mesidor, who's going to, hopefully, for Miami, make the return this week. And their defensive line will be at full strength, which will be interesting for SMU's offensive line that has been banged up lately. It's going to be one of those things that on our defensive front, you're going to have to overcome some adversity. This Miami offensive line is also very good. Multiple midseason All-Americans. Carson Beck is at his best when he's comfortable. And for SMU to have success on Saturday, you're going to have to get after the quarterback and force a couple of turnovers.
And I think for this game, I mean, this is where SMU has to find those holes like Louisville did at times to exploit them, because you're not going to get that Carson Beck that played against Louisville. I mean, this is a team that takes care of the football. They don't really give you many holes to poke in their game. They might kind of fall asleep from time to time. You look at late against Notre Dame, late against Florida State, things like that. But Miami, despite the loss to Louisville, is still you could argue one or two in the ACC. I mean, yes, Georgia Tech doesn't have a loss, but I'm sure there are many people willing to make the argument that Miami would win on a neutral field right now against Georgia Tech. And the way that Yellow Jackets are playing, though, they're going to end up in Charlotte if they keep things rolling. Same with UVA. They've got to win out. Miami, they have to win out. They need some help. That's where this weekend at SMU is so critical for both teams as they do step into this spotlight, 11 a.m. on ESPN, nationally televised game. The ACC slate this weekend is it's just okay. It has a lot of games that really shouldn't have too much intrigue around them, but SMU-Miami does. 2 one-loss teams in ACC play. It's an elimination game, and whether you're Miami, you're SMU, you've got to come out trying to fire on all cylinders so that you're not playing from behind in this one.
And that's going to be critical because SMU has not started well in their last few games. And you can tell as they kind of slug their way through that first half, SMU is notorious for taking the ball first after the coin flip, which is great. If you can get off to a fast start, you can drive the field and you can get points. But ultimately, SMU has not done that this year. For us to be competitive in this elimination game where you're going to have ACC huddle on site, we're going to have all of our friends out there on the boulevard, which is going to be electric. I'm really excited. I can't wait to see them. But SMU is going to have to come out of the gate. And one of my keys to the game on our show is that no matter what happens with the coin toss, offense or defense up first, you have to go out and make a statement on that opening drive. Whether that's you get after the passer and you sack Carson Beck on the first third down, or Kevin Jennings has one of his better early game performances of the year. You drive the field and even get a field goal there to where you can play from ahead, you can get some confidence into that stadium, you can get the energy going, and hopefully this team feeds off of that and is able to play at a high level because this team feeds off of the energy in the stadium. We go to Clemson a couple weeks ago, everybody was fired up. We go to Wake Forest last week, and no shot at the Demon Deacons, but it was not the same environment. There were maybe 10,000 people there at kickoff. It just felt very slow to open the game. SMU essentially goes 4 or 5 and out. They had the first drive extended by a penalty. But other than that, they could not get anything going on offense. So this team is going to need some early confidence-inspiring plays, maybe some short crossers for Kevin Jennings just to get him something going, maybe some early and easy runs that we can just get to our base stuff. But ultimately, you're going to have some early success to inspire some confidence in this team.
No question about it. You look at the ACC rates right now. If you're SMU, you're trying to obviously stay alive in that, Hayden. If you're Miami, you're trying to stay alive in it. Right now, it's Georgia Tech, UVA. Let's get a little prediction here. Let's look ahead in the magic 8 ball of Hayden Howerton. Does Georgia Tech and Miami, or does Georgia Tech and UVA win out this ACC slate and get to Charlotte and shut out programs like Miami, like SMU, like Pitt, that are trying to get in there with those 1 losses?
I think one of them does. I think Georgia Tech is probably my pick to win out the rest of their games. I mean, I think that matchup at the end of the year with the Georgia Bulldogs, I don't think they're going to go unbeaten, but ultimately I think they're going to end up at 8-0 in ACC play. I think they will be one of the teams waiting in Charlotte heading into the last week of the regular season with their spot already clinched. UVA, on the other hand, I think has gotten in some dicey situations. They go on the road to North Carolina. They have to win that game in overtime. Chapel Bill goes for 2 in overtime. He's got all the momentum. Why not try to win the game right there? I love the decision. Ultimately, they come up short. UVA hangs on. They stay unbeaten, but they do have a tough road ahead. They do have to go play Duke, who I think is one of those teams that probably has the best shot to beat them late this year. I think the Duke Blue Devils have something cooking over there, and they almost got after us last year when we made the trip up to Durham. And so I look at the job that Manny Diaz has done over there, and I think Johnny Brewer, as the offensive coordinator, has got something cooking out there, where that's going to be one of those games that I probably have circled as my ACC huddle pick of the week, so to speak. But ultimately, I think Georgia Tech goes unbeaten. I don't think UVA does. I think it's going to be one of these 1-loss teams that ends up in the conference championship race, to where maybe it's Miami, maybe it's SMU. The picture will certainly be a little more clear after this weekend, but there are a lot of teams that could make a running here for the trip to Charlotte.
If Pitt can get by this game all the way out at Stanford, I'm watching Pitt as well. They've got a red-hot quarterback. It's very similar to SMU and how they inserted Kevin Jennings. They went to Mason Heichel, and the rest of their schedule, though, would be just incredible for them to win out, but it would be quite the story in college football if they finish up, they find a way to win at Stanford this weekend, and then they get a bye. And boy, do they need it, because their final 3 games, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, and Miami. Holy cow. If Pitt were to pull it off, that would be incredible. And they'd have 3 signature wins, at that point to get that done. So it would be something else if Pitt finished it out. But yeah, Miami's going to be, the pick for a lot of teams or a lot of people around the country to get into Charlotte. But we'll see. Their last game of the year for the regular season could very well be a play-in game to that ACC championship if one of UVA or Georgia Tech falls, and maybe Georgia Tech falls to Pitt. We'll see. But it's going to be incredible to watch. We're going to be tracking it all. You can find Hayden Howerton at ontheponyexpress.com, a part of the On Three Rivals Network, the On the Pony Express podcast. He's got a film breakdown each week, so make sure you guys check it out and continue to follow Hayden. We'll keep having him on. We've got to have in this conference, we've got to have the offensive linemen represented with guys like Mario Cristobal at the helm and some of these blue-collar programs around the conference represented. So, Hayden, thanks for stopping by this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Love the parity right now in the ACC. It's certainly a lot of fun. You're going to have one of these teams that hasn't historically been an ACC dominant force win the conference this year, and I think that's great for the league. I mean, it's great that Clemson went on this run, that you've had the Florida State kind of dominance that they've had the last 10 to 15 years as well. But ultimately, it's going to be fun seeing a couple of teams that have not been a front runner in the ACC go get it done this year. Can't wait to bring more to you guys as the season continues. And Billy, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. There he goes. Hayden Howerton, thanks so much for joining us over here this morning at All Access AM. We'll continue to have him on as we keep things rolling. Do want to, of course, remind you about our friends at Horn Legend. Incredible pullovers, polos, sports shirts, and more that they have to offer as the temperatures cool down. Make sure you grab them. I'm wearing one of their pullovers right now. Really, really comfortable stuff, and just kind of the great, fabric that they've got. It's kind of that cross between breathable, but also would keep you warm if it was a brisk morning for a walk. So we appreciate our friends at Horn Legend. Go to hornlegend.com for more, for a look at all of the different, brand, styles and school polos and all the things that they have to offer, because it's a pretty incredible selection. So Hayden Howerton led us off breaking down a little SMU-Miami preview. We've got a jam-packed show the rest of the day. The rest of the show. Going to look at our power rankings, kind of update those a little bit, because I do think there's been some shifting now. For much of the season, we've seen the same kind of order for the most part, but I'm going to mix it up here a little bit for you guys on this one, because I really feel like we're starting to see a little bit of separation at times with some of these programs as they're trying to figure things out when it comes to the ACC race here. I think we're seeing programs like North Carolina kind of make a move, dare I say it. They haven't broken through in the win column, but wins and kind of where you stand from a pure record standpoint don't dictate power rankings. That's why they have standings. Those are what are going to stick out as far as the standings and the pure facts of, okay, this team is 1-7 Boston College, 0-5 in ACC play. That's the standings. They're the bottom of the barrel. Are they the bottom of the barrel in the power rankings? Let's find out. We'll jump into these power rankings right now. For me, I lead off with Boston College at the bottom. They are the team that has just struggled throughout this season in the ACC to do much of anything. They have really just completely fallen apart for the most part. And I think, if you're an ACC fan, Boston College is pretty disappointing. It is a pretty disappointing program. And what they've been able to do this year is not much of anything. So they sit at the bottom of the standings, and they sit at the bottom of my power rankings. This is where things get a little different now, because I think we've really seen a shift as of late in these bottom four. I am going to have a team that is not at the bottom of the standing here in a sense, because they do have a signature win on their resume. But I think Syracuse right now is second to last, number 16 in my ACC Power Rankings. They are sitting there with a win, obviously, over Clemson. Steve Angeli gets hurt in that game. They're now 3-5 overall, but they kind of woke up, played hard against Georgia Tech, and were ready to roll in that kind of feisty game against Brent Key and company. But Syracuse, they just can't really do much, as a whole right now offensively, and that really holds them back. There's very little hope for them the rest of the season. I think they would lose probably to just about anybody outside of Boston College in this conference right now. I've got to have them as second to last in my power rankings. When you look at who's next, I sit there and I say Florida State. Florida State has not been a team that has obviously won an ACC game in over a year now. That has to matter when you're talking about power rankings. And yes, Tommy Castellanos and this Florida State offense hasn't been bad. The Gus Malzahn experiment hasn't been a bad thing. And you also have a defense that is still playing okay. It just doesn't all come together. And there's all sorts of issues and disconnects in Tallahassee right now. And of course, the rumors are swirling around Mike Norvell and his future. Then you have the schedule and kind of seeing what's next for them. It's tough for me to see them breaking through and finding a way with the way Wake Forest is playing. Then they play Clemson. They've got Virginia Tech, who just beat Cal. NC State is the one where maybe they can finally break through and win a game in conference play. Now, they'll have 4 opportunities here over those next few weeks to get that, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that Florida State, it's on the table that they could go winless in conference play this season again. So really, really intrigued to see how Florida State finishes. Obviously, that'll dictate a lot in terms of what happens with Mike Norvell, but I've got them at that number 15 spot in my power rankings. When you look at 14, I am getting impressed with what North Carolina is doing. They're being pesky. They're sticking their nose in there, and they're getting really, really close to breaking through on the football field. And I am not a fan of how this thing is going with Bill Belichick. I thought it was, probably going to be quite the adventure. I thought there would be a good floor, though. I did not think it would be the bottom of the barrel type of situation with Bill Belichick and this North Carolina Tar Heel team. I look at the remaining schedule at Syracuse. This is going to solve one of my power ranking issues right off the bat. And Syracuse, North Carolina, Friday night, 6:30. Everybody lock in. A little Halloween, little Spooktober up there at the Carrier Dome. Bill Belichick, can he play kind of Grim Reaper, so to speak, for Fran Brown and company as North Carolina is going to try to break through. This could be that time where they break through. If not, guess what? I just get to move them around in my power rankings and get proven wrong by Fran Brown. But I just think offensively, if Syracuse doesn't have that, which they really haven't had since Steve Angeli has gone down, North Carolina might be able to win a football game like that. That's a team that's an opportunity that is there for them. Then they play Stanford at home. They play Wake Forest on the road. Then they play Duke and North Carolina State. So there's some other opportunities for them with some teams that, might not be as consistent as they would like. They could win at Syracuse and then win against Stanford. And all of a sudden they pick up 2 wins back to back. And I look like, kind of seeing it as it's happening and having them up in the power rankings above some of those teams. Or they continue to cellar dwell and they look like then they would be headed for potentially a winless season in ACC play. When I look at Stanford, that is a team that, I really struggle with. But Stanford is not next on my power rankings. At number 13, I've got North Carolina State. Really, really difficult for me to see this thing staying on the tracks with the way things are going over there. Dave Dorian's been there a long, long time now. You're seeing them lose, at Pitt. They get, just destroyed. They've lost to Virginia Tech. They've lost to Duke. They kind of had an early season run that you were like, okay, maybe this is going to work out. but it hasn't. Since they've really been in the meat of that conference schedule, they have not looked the part. And this weekend doesn't help when they play Georgia Tech at home, and they're going to have a chance to maybe pull a crazy upset, but I don't see it happening. I think NC State, you look at the end of their schedule, then they go on the road at Miami, Florida State, and then, of course, finish up with North Carolina. It nothing really looks like to me that they're going to be able to pull out of this. And that is so concerning with the talent that they have, because it's not like they're, without talent. They have it. They've just not been able to put it together. And I think that should be taken into account. There's no question about it. At number 12, I go with Stanford. I think Stanford has shown again that kind of ability to be in different games. And I thought, if they're not traveling all the way across the country to play Miami, I know they started well and they had it 7-7 and things were at least trending where they could be competitive and they can, hang around, and that should kind of, push away they traveled all the way across the country. It still doesn't take away that takes a lot out of you, and all the energy they exerted to play that hard and to be in that position with Miami. You can't ignore that. And so I will give Stanford credit. I have them at 12 in my power rankings. They have a chance to continue to move up with the schedule that they have. They have some opportunities here. Next week, they'll go on the road and face North Carolina. Stanford does play Pitt this weekend at home, so Pitt has to avoid the Florida State situation. Mason Heinschel and the true freshman quarterback that has started these games as of late for Pitt, who's been starring. He's been getting all the credit he deserves. How do you handle that when you go all the way out to the West Coast? This is going to be a challenge for them to be ready to go. But Stanford has been in the situation welcoming a more powerful team, a more talented team to their stadium. They did get a win. I'm not suggesting that Stanford is going to beat Pitt, but that would be, again, kind of a nice trend in the right direction here for my power rankings, at least, if Stanford did get the win. So to kind of recap right now, number 17 is Boston College. There's no question about that. Number 16 is Syracuse. Number 15 is Florida State. Number 14, North Carolina. Number 13, NC State. Number 12, Stanford on these power rankings. Number 11 for me, I am going with Virginia Tech. I think they obviously got a nice boost there, winning against Cal at home Friday night. That stood out to me in a big way. They did a really nice job, feeding off of that Lane Stadium environment over there. And again, the Friday night game, the long travel for Cal, it paid off as Virginia Tech was able to get that win. So you've got to give credit where credit's due. I still think that you're sitting at 2-2. They could be a kind of a home wrecker type of team for some programs across the country as they, try to play spoiler and they try to get maybe Philip Montgomery this job. But there's been a lot more that has obviously gone wrong for Virginia Tech this season. More often than not, they've put together some promising games as of late. I don't know if they're going to be able to fully pull out of it. Like, I wanted them to move up a little bit more, but I still think they would lose to a Clemson. They would obviously lose again to a Cal. But so that's kind of what held me back from putting them above that. But at number 10, I'm going to go with Cal. Cal has been a team that I think, really showed a lot of promise early in the season, but has lost 2 of their last 3, 3 of their last 5, and really, hasn't, I think, taken advantage of some of the opportunities that they've had to get some wins and kind of obviously, avoid that letdown loss at Virginia Tech, even though that's a tough place to play. But they're still sitting at 5-3. They're not some crazy, it's not all bad out there. They're going to be bowl eligible most likely. They do have a tough road to get there. They've got Virginia this weekend at home, and then by the way, both California teams are playing at the same time this weekend, which is interesting out there for us. 2:30 and 2:45 Central 3:30, 3:45 Eastern. Both Cal and Stanford will be at home this weekend facing their opponents. And then they go on the road at Louisville, and then they play at Stanford, and then they play SMU. So they have quite the test there. So they could go over the rest of the way, and this would still be a season that you'd feel decent about, but you want to see them, if you're a Cal fan, break through and get to bowl eligibility. Who would have thought that Virginia would have been a huge test for them? And then, of course, Stanford is a tough one to face, the way they've been battle tested with road trips to SMU, Miami, things like that, getting the win against Florida State. So good test for Cal here. And then number 9, Clemson for me. I still think they're a team that has talent. I do think the bye week will help. It would not shock me at all if they beat Duke this weekend. I almost had Duke in this 9 spot just because, obviously they had the bye last week too. But, for Duke, I still think they're a team that needs to maybe prove it this season and kind of take that next step. And if they do, great. They've got some opportunities down the stretch to do that as well, starting this weekend on the road at Clemson. But if they don't, then this is going to be a disappointing season for Manny Diaz with what they've invested in Darian Mensah. They've got at UConn, which is not going to be an easy game. Jim Moore Jr. and them have made things happen. Then they play Virginia at home. That's a game to circle. At North Carolina, and then against Wake Forest. So some things on the table for Duke. They sit at 4-3 overall, and they sit at 3-1 in league play. So technically not eliminated from the conference championship race by any means, but it just is a team that I could have had at this 9 spot with Clemson, but I didn't for whatever reason. Number 8, SMU. I kind of battled here with this spot as well. Do I have SMU ahead of Duke? I probably should, but the offensive performance last week is just so concerning. I'm going to need to see a little bit more from SMU to make things better in their world because they really haven't shown enough to me so far to be in that position. It's been up and down offensively. The defense has started to take a turn. So there is a world where, we'll look up after this weekend and they've played really well, and maybe they won, maybe they lost. And we're sitting here saying, okay, all right, they should have been above a Duke. They should have been above a Wake Forest. Again, these are power rankings. They're not the standings. They're not the AP rankings. They're not any of that. But right now, just coming off what they did last week at Wake Forest, got to knock them down a peg. And so they sit there. Again, kind of a 2/3 of the way through update. We have Boston College at the bottom. We have Syracuse at number 16. At number 15, we have Florida State. Number 14, North Carolina. And then number 13, NC State. Number 12, Stanford. Number 11 is Virginia Tech, I believe I had there. Number 10, Cal. Number 9, Clemson. Number 8, SMU. And we get to this portion of the power rankings, and this is where you could really see it go up, down, whatever. Number 7, I do have is Duke. I think they're a really, really good team, but Wake Forest is on a roll right now. So I've got Wake at number 6. I think for me, it's more consistency. Wake Forest, obviously should have a win over Georgia Tech. There's no doubt about that. But Duke has kind of been all over the place, just giving away games, not playing fundamentally sound in that regard. Their losses early in the year, stand out, but they were able to go on the road at Cal and get a win. They should probably be above Wake Forest, but that Wake Forest team is really playing with a lot of confidence, and I think they're built better than Duke right now. That's just the reality of how I see it. But so I'll have Wake Forest at 6, of course, and we'll kind of see how all of this plays out. Now, number 5, this is where things really get interesting. My number 5 power ranking team is Virginia. Here's why. Virginia is messing around. They are messing around with their food. They are not playing well as a whole, and they are going to pay for it if they keep it up. You only have so many lives in this game of football, And if Virginia keeps, being in these games with some of these teams that they, really, you can make the argument should be in with, like nobody is saying that Virginia is this uber insanely talented team that should be blowing out programs like Washington State, like North Carolina, things like that. But they're playing down to their competition, at least relative to how their team this year is doing. Chandler Morris has to really right that ship, I think, as the leader, get it back on track offensively. They've gone, again, they were overtime against Florida State and Louisville, but then these last 2 weeks, 22 points, or really 20 points offensively, and then 17 points over the against North Carolina. That's a concerning trend when you go on the road at Cal. This is a game that, okay, we're circling, very, very real chance that unless Virginia gets off the bus ready to go, that they're going to be dealt a loss, and that would really set them back in that ACC championship race. And again, it's power rankings, so I've got to take that into account that Virginia's not playing too well. I could go a bunch of different ways here. I am going to respect how Georgia Tech has won, so a little bit of a spoiler alert there. I am going to go with Pitt here at the 4 spot. I want to put Pitt higher. I still have a little bit of questions around how consistent can this go on for? How consistently can this go on for, in terms of how they can, put together the wins and true freshman quarterback and all of that. Are they going to keep rising up the ranks and having a chance with their last 3 games to make this big move? That could happen. It really could. It is a program that, with Mason Heinschel at the helm, looks like a completely different situation than where they would have been if Mason Heinschel had played the way he did all season long and been the starter all season long, but he hasn't. So they're still kind of pushing in that right direction. They're going to get super tested over the next few weeks as they'll go on the road, and they'll do all, and then they'll face the Notre Dame, the Georgia Tech, Miami, and that's where we'll find out where things stand. I am going to have Miami at number 3 in the power rankings, just because I still think Miami obviously deserves a ton of respect, but they did lose on a neutral field to Louisville. Obviously, you can make the case that Miami would win that game X number of times out of X number of times, but Louisville beat them straight up and forced those turnovers too. This isn't this wasn't a gimmick. Jeff Brom and his team, were able to step up and make plays. So Miami sits at 3, right behind Louisville in terms of the power rankings. And then Georgia Tech, what they were able to do, I think, last week against Syracuse really impressed me. They kind of, woke up a little bit there, and Syracuse, obviously started out a little bit better than Georgia Tech, and you're thinking, okay, all right, Fran Brown might have it. But you look at where their schedule is: at NC State, at Boston College, then they play Pitt. That's obviously the big one. And then they play Georgia. This schedule plays out and suggests that they would and should be able to make their run and finish it off and get to Charlotte. That Pitt game will be a massive one, as we know. And at the same time, power rankings are not looking ahead. They're not projecting. If I was projecting, man, it would not be insane for somebody right now with the way Pitt is playing to pick them over Georgia Tech straight up. But Haynes King just seems like a guy of destiny right now to at least be in New York and have this team in Charlotte. Anthony Perez checking in with us this morning live, says go Jackets. That's right. Go Jackets at this point. They're the ACC's hope for a kind of slam dunk type of really highly seeded program in the college football playoff. If you're looking at it from a need to perspective, the best case scenario for the ACC could be that Georgia Tech and UVA win out. They get to Charlotte. They play for it. Maybe UVA wins that game and then punches their ticket and Georgia Tech gets in. And then you have Miami making it as an at-large. But, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets are that team that right now is kind of carrying that torch. They're playing good football. They're playing up to the standard that Brent Key wants. They've not had a one-possession game since that Wake Forest game, and they really haven't been tested too much this season, in a sense, at least as of late. So they're going to have to make sure that complacency doesn't set in. But they're my number one team in the ACC Power Rankings that I've got. I think it makes a lot of sense for them to win out and go to Charlotte, but it's not going to be easy either. It's really not, and it's going to be a really intriguing run of games for them because on paper it looks like they should be in Charlotte. They've only got 3 ACC games to go before, of course, they finish up with the Georgia Bulldogs. But that Pitt one is starting to loom large, and man, that is a talk about a war between two programs that have taken on that persona of their head coach so well this season, Brent Key and Pat Narduzzi. That Georgia Tech Pitt game might be the one that out of all of them on the schedule that I'm circling, and I'm like, this is going to be so much fun to watch. So that's kind of my rundown on the ACC Power Rankings. Of course, Georgia Tech sits at the top, unbeaten, unblemished record. Haynes King getting all the respect that he deserves, and Brent Key as well. He'll be brought up as a coaching candidate. I'm sure Ryan Alpert and the staff at Georgia Tech working very, very, very quickly to extend him and get him locked in as the head coach of his alma mater for a long, long time. So a lot of investment going on in Atlanta. There's no question about that. Make sure you guys invest with our friends at OPW Solutions. Again, want to thank them for sponsoring the show. Give them a call, 214-444-2305, info@opwsolutions.com, or go to opwsolutions.com. They're a full-service commercial maintenance company from your landscaping, pressure washing, snow and ice control, fence and concrete repair, and more. They're in North Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and they're expanding in 2026. So give them a call. See if you're out of market, see if it's something that works for you, that they can maybe make the run over to where you are and where your business is. So we appreciate their support of All Access AM. Do me a favor, guys. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. Leave us a rating. Leave us a review on our podcast. We're really trying to make this grow, be something for all ACC fans to enjoy on your Monday, Wednesday, Thursday mornings, 7 to 8 a.m. Central live, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern time. We'll have Dana Boyle on Thursday morning to preview the weekend. So make sure you guys tune in for that. Probably have a couple other guests as we'll go heavy into the ACC Week 10 previewing. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys some of my picks on the weekend for ACC football and kind of give you maybe a lock of the week, a team that I really expect to do some big things this weekend. If you look at this schedule and the slate of games, there's really not too many that stand out. But truthfully, the probably the top 2 games of this weekend are probably the 11 a.m. games, Miami at SMU on ESPN and Duke at Clemson at 11 a.m. on ACC Network. I am really intrigued about this Duke Clemson game. This is one that I think for me can send these programs in very different directions the rest of the season. According to BetMGM, Clemson 3.5-point favorites. The total set at 55.5. I'm not huge on totals, but I feel like both of these teams coming off the bye week are going to play defensive football. And Darian Mensah has been prone to turnovers at times. You have Clemson that they've just struggled offensively. If I was going to take on the total, I would probably go under. But I think I'm leaning towards my kind of lockish pick for Clemson to come away with this win and cover. I could see it being like a 20-10 type of win. I could see it being a 24-14, 24-13 type of win for Clemson. I just think with this bye week, Dabo Swinney is going to put everything into it. Obviously, Duke is as well, but I like Clemson's roster. I like their ability to circle the wagons there for Dabo Swinney and kind of get things on track. It is a precarious spot for Clemson at 3-4. They've got to have this one, or else the rest of the way looks really, really dark for Clemson. Just from a buy-in perspective, there's still a get-right game opportunity next week at home against Florida State, but then you play at Louisville. You've got Furman before you play at South Carolina, who has not played well at all. If there's a game that Dabo Swinney has to have, if there's a game that Clemson needs to come away with a win, it's at South Carolina this week. Not this week, this year. If Clemson takes care of business at South Carolina, that will at least get you into the bowl season, at least if Clemson's going to go bowling, with a little bit of, okay, you took care of your rival, you took care of that program, that rivalry game where last year they didn't, and they really weren't competitive in it, in my opinion. Just it looked like the roster, it looked like a preview of what we've seen from the roster this year from Clemson and all the issues that were there. So for Clemson, they're going to have to take care of business against South Carolina at the end of the season. This weekend, though, I think they can at least start off things on the right track with these 5 games in 5 weeks by getting a win over Duke. I like Clemson to cover. They'll be a pick for me to cover this weekend and take care of business. When you look at that SMU-Miami game, man, as much as you want to go ahead and pick SMU to cover, or it probably is a pick that will get some buzz at least around SMU, saying, okay, they couldn't possibly play the way they did at Wake. Miami coming off the win at Stanford, Miami's first trip outside of the state of Florida. Is Miami going to wilt in November like it has at times? Valid points, but SMU going to be a really I don't know if they're going to do it, but I'm going to pick SMU to cover. I do think at home SMU has found a way to play better offensively throughout Rhett Lashley's head coaching career. Miami is double-digit favorite right now. This is a game where SMU, no one's expecting anything out of them. There's zero pressure in this game, because that's how bad last week was against Wake Forest. Yeah, that's the thing, is this is not a game where anyone, at least on the SMU side, externally, is saying, wow, this is a elimination game for the ACC championship race. SMU Miami, what a big game. SMU is coming off of such a poor performance last week that obviously most everybody has conceded that Miami will probably win this game. In that building, they do a really good job of getting their players up for games like this. They really do. They fought really hard in some of their big games this year. They let one slip away against Baylor, but they started fast. They let one slip away against TCU after battling back and taking a lead, but they fell. They went on the road at Clemson and kind of righted the ship. They got a win, a much-needed win in a raucous environment that SMU had not won that type of game in a long, long time in this program, and then they just had a major letdown. Everything, at least externally, is kind of saying, forget about SMU. They blew their chance. They're now on the outside looking in the ACC championship race, which is true. They don't control their own destiny anymore. But what they can control is how fast they start, how hard they play. Can they out-hit Miami? Can they be physical at the point of attack? That rush defense for SMU, like Hayden Howerton talked about earlier in the show, is a rush defense that is really impressive. It's a group that is really strained to be as good as they are throughout the season, battling through injuries, battling through new players. Well, they figured it out from a rush defense perspective. Their secondary forces turnovers. If you see that with Carson Beck, that is another calling card. That is an opportunity for SMU to take advantage of. That's where I think SMU can keep this one close. I don't think they get it done. Let me be very clear. But I could see it being a closer game than the double-digit spread that is out there right now for that matchup. So that is my kind of SMU, Miami, and Clemson Duke picks. Those are the two big games for me going into this weekend. Louisville at Virginia Tech is nice. That's two good brands. Notre Dame at Boston College should be a bloodbath for Notre Dame. Pitt at Stanford. That would probably be, if I had an upset alert pick, that would be the upset alert. Because, yes, Miami's double-digit favorites against SMU, but everyone's talking about that game. The huddle's there. There's focus there. That long trip out to Stanford for Pitt, that is kind of upset city. You could say the same Virginia at Cal just because of Virginia playing with its food like it has. But Virginia has played so many games so close lately that it would not be surprising at all if that happened. Then you have Georgia Tech at NC State and Wake Forest at Florida State, where both of those teams should take care of business this weekend, or else once again, kind of a ACC eating your own kind of weekend could unfold if those two teams, Georgia Tech and Wake Forest, fall on their road trips to NC State and Florida State, respectively. Let's talk about North Carolina at Syracuse, though, to close out the show. Bill Belichick and what his staff has done the last couple of outings, getting them to the point where they're one play away. I mean, they're one play away multiple times at Cal, at Virginia, against Virginia at home. They're putting in the work to be in position. Is this the weekend they break through? That is what the question is. They play on Halloween. They've got a little Friday night game. Bill Belichick, I feel like he relishes those opportunities to go on the road and, kind of have a Halloween backdrop against one of the top young coaches in the conference. If Steve Angeli's still at the helm, you got to believe that Syracuse would be in position for the college football playoff right now, without a doubt. Syracuse cannot move the football. They've really not been able to do much of anything lately offensively since Steve Angeli has gone down. And at the same time, North Carolina has stepped up. They were able to hold Virginia to 17 points. They were on the road at Cal and held them to 21 points. Even Clemson, that wasn't it was bad, but it wasn't awful relative to how the early parts of the season for North Carolina had gone, getting blown out by TCU, by UCF, and things like that. I think defensively, North Carolina is starting to settle in. It would not shock me at all if this was kind of a 17-10 type of game, and we kind of see them finally break through. The Carrier Dome, of course, is going to be nice and cozy for everybody up there, but Syracuse is only a 2-point favorite in this one. I'm taking North Carolina to cover, taking them to get their first win of the season. The total, we talked about the total in the Clemson-Duke game. The total for this one, 44.5 points. Not too far off from that 17-10 type of prediction that I've got out there. Now, I could see this being a little bit more of a field goal fest than that. So you could see it being, 13-16. You could see it being something like that. But I do like North Carolina to go up there and finally break through. And this is not an indictment on where the program at Syracuse is going under Fran Brown. This is bad luck. And this goes to show you, and we talked about this in the offseason when we previewed the league, Ricky Collins, he's doing the best he can. Syracuse, they're doing the best they can with the card they've been dealt now with the injury to Steve Angeli. But that's also why they went out and got Steve Angeli. They've got Luke Carney in there as well, and maybe he really emerges as somebody who changes the game for them if they give him that extended opportunity. But this is why Fran Brown went out and got Steve Angeli. You're seeing this offensively just not work out, and it's a shame, because Syracuse had so much promise to be that super trendy buzz pick going into this season, and it was just a matter of, well, what's Steve Angeli going to do? Well, he was leading the conference in throwing the football and passing yards, and really stepped into that starting spot and did a really nice job for them as a whole. So at the same time, I'm going to go with my gut here. I'm going to go with Bill Belichick in North Carolina to get their first win of the season in ACC play up on the road at Syracuse. This is a game that before the season you were like, oh, this is going to be nice. This is going to be a heck of a Friday night game for these two programs. And it's kind of been a house of horrors for them both in ACC play and obviously, for the majority of the season for North Carolina. But North Carolina is close here. I'm going to go and pick Bill Belichick and the Tar Heels to get their first win in ACC play against Syracuse. So it's going to be a really fun Week 10. Again, you're going to kind of have those 11 a.m. or noon games wherever you're time zone is in ACC play to kind of kick off with two really intriguing matchups. And then you're kind of on pins and needles the rest of the day to see if the ACC eats its own or if teams take care of business. We could be recapping a wild Week 10 on Monday, or we could be looking at it and say, okay, everything is still in order here. The college football playoff picture with Georgia Tech, with Miami, with teams like that is still sitting exactly where it needs to be, and Virginia sitting in there as well. But that's why they play the games. It is a really difficult thing for some of these teams to go on the road and win and do it without getting shocked and being ready to go right off the bat. And that's what all of these teams are going to have to do this weekend in Week 10, because there's a lot of that kind of sleeper, upset, maybe letdown type of games out there for some of these teams. So we'll be tracking it all on All Access AM. I really appreciate all of you guys who have hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/allaccessam and subscribe to the channel, please. It just takes one click. It just takes you clicking a button. It doesn't sign you up for any sort of and it's youtube.com/allaccessam to get on there. So or maybe it's not, but just search YouTube and All Access AM and click that subscribe button for us to kick off your mornings and throw us on alerts so you know when we're going live Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern time. We appreciate OPW Solutions and all of our sponsors for helping us out. Hope you guys give us a follow, leave us a rating, leave us a review, share us with your ACC friends. We're looking forward to a jam-packed Thursday show with some guests, including ACC Network's Dana Boyle, who's going to break down all things ACC on Thursday. So hopefully you guys will be there with us watching. Have a great Wednesday, everyone. Thanks for being here, and we'll catch you guys next